I thought I would share an exchange I had with Darwin way back. He was, and, many of you have heard this before, but I think it's relevant to this particular chapter. And uh, this was back in around 1970, and I was living up there near them in Schenectady, New York. And we were, go to the meetings there on the weekends. And after one of these meetings, after we were standing around in the hubbub of the post meeting and drinking apple juice and cookies, and I'm kind of standing near Darwin, and he looks at me. Now, Darwin is very low key and everything, but he turns to me and he says, "Jeff, you are not the personality self." Now, I'd never really heard the term, but in that moment, I knew what he was talking about. And Darwin, I should say, was very low key, but he was like a mystic in disguise, you might say. But anyway, so he says, "I'm not the personality self," and I thought the whole purpose up to that point was to get to know my personality self, to know it well and going on and improving it until I reached the goal. Now he's suggesting that I'm barking up the wrong tree altogether. But I had no place to put that. I mean, like, if I'm not the personality self, I mean, what, where am I? So, but I just kind of filed it away, and I thought, well, I'll see if I evolve into the truth of that. But he was said later on. He said the personality self, I mean, who we are, he would say is just a storefront for the soul. And we make such a big deal of the window displays, and we change them with each season, when we could go inside and enjoy the priceless merchandise inside. We could go to the realm of the spirit and not be totally identified with this personality self. Well, that's something he said way back, and it took decades and decades to get a deeper understanding of what he was talking about. Anyway, um, Jay Sema, if let's see if Marta, do you feel like reading it all? And I wonder, Jay Sema, if you can put that up. Beautiful. Have we got Marta on or
Yeah, Jeff,
otherwise?
I'm on.
Okay, good. Go for it.
One of the major inner stances we need to adopt is that of letting love flow while not letting while not getting caught up in our current scenario. Hmm. It is all a passing show. Love is the only real thing that is happening. Our constant becomes a connection with the master at the center of our being. Then, at a lower level, the illusory world is passing by. I feel that we must make efforts to withdraw our attention from all the illusory happenings more and more so that we can remain steadfast in a constant relationship with the master within. When he was in his physical form, Baba assured us that with his infinite consciousness, he would be with us always, wherever we were, whatever we were doing, so that our actions would not have a binding effect on us. Oh, naturally, we are not going to purposely do things that would be wrong. This assurance was to give us an inner sense of detachment from the illusion, replacing it with his love and presence. Beloved Baba's living presence is something we can have with us all the time. By thinking of him, focusing on him with love, and trying to love him more and more. Ultimately, we will be doing this anyway. We will be funneled into the position where we love God completely with all of our heart. And the sooner we can get to that point, the sooner we will be free from the unnecessary suffering of all the opposites. Excuse me.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay. Anyone have something to say to that? I mean, I'm sure all of us in varying degrees experience Baba with us, and trying to deepen that experience so that it survives all the other distractions in the world. I mean, not that the Oscars are a distraction, but you know. So, anyone have something to say to that? I think it's pretty self-explanatory and straightforward. And we got Susan Smith here. Good to see her, and Jennifer back. Okay, let's go on to the next one then.
I guess Anthony has.
Oh, Anthony, yeah.
Hey, J Bob, you guys gonna jump in? Yeah, it's just I don't know, it's just amazing. I mean, Bob of course says it too, how everything going on this plane is illusory. And I'd read something on the internet the other day there. Baba was talking about somebody who is blind, and I guess this person was saying how unfortunate they were because they were blind. And Baba had said this person is actually more fortunate than all of you because he's seeing less of illusion. And it just, I don't know, it blows my mind how that's the nature of everything going on this plane. And that, like Darwin says, we have to withdraw from everything we're seeing, hearing, the events going on to try to contact him more. But God, what a thing to just get accustomed to gradually.
Yeah, I know. I used to think of Darwin as like a Teflon pan, and he mixes in the morning. He mixes up this great dish for everybody, and he serves it all day long. And just at the end of the day, just turns the frying pan upside down. Nothing sticks. I mean, he's like engaged in everything, but nothing would stick, And that's a beautiful. I mean, he was withdrawn, but not withdrawn from life, just withdrawn from being, entangled by things. So he, didn't even have oil. Just the Teflon was fine. Okay. Any other comments, or should we move on? Oh,
Susan has.
Yeah, can you hear me?
yeah, good.
Okay. Yeah, so this is interesting because and I'm not sure that I don't know, what's coming up in me is something I read today, which is learning to love Baba more in John Grant's book. And it seems sort of to counter this not getting involved in life with seeing that everything that comes to us in life comes from the creator. And so even the colors of the leaves, Baba explained in this very beautiful description of how to love him more. So I don't know if that's sort of a parallel to these two paragraphs. What do you think about that, Jeff?
Yeah, it's hard to they don't actually contradict one another. If you begin to see the divine presence in everything, which Baba talks about, then you can be in the world, and nothing, you don't get caught up in it. I mean, you see the beauty, you see the divine in everything, but that's a hard stage. I mean, that takes a long time to where you start to feel the divine presence in everything. In the meantime, sometimes it's good to keep a little distance from certain things.
Well, it's not necessarily the presence, but just realizing that everything is a part of this. You know, he goes into the detail of what you're eating and into even more explicit details of your bodily functions and just being appreciative of everything as you can relate back to, wow, you know, Baba fasted for so long. Oh, Baba had hemorrhoids. Baba, you know, everything linking back to sort of his suffering, because I've heard recently the path of love is really enhanced when we feel more about how Baba suffered for humanity, and that's sort of touched me recently.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, I mean, these are all different ways of connecting intimately with Baba. And there comes a time when we are able to experience these things, you know, and beautiful.
Yeah, it doesn't really contradict, but it seems to be sort of both and parallel.
Yeah, yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Martha?
I also wanted to point out, I was really surprised a while back when I found out that Baba had gone through quite a long time of very deep depression. And the Mandali were very concerned, and nothing they did could budge Baba out of this depression. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because I have so many friends that are struggling with depression on some, you know, there's different levels. So I just feel that Baba experienced that to help all of us.
Yeah.
With each thing that we all go through, I'm just focusing on depression because I was very surprised that Baba got depressed. I mean, it makes sense. If you created all this mess, it would be very depressing. But since he created it, I don't, you know, it's like you're depressed, but it was for a long time too, you know? So I just wanted to focus on that and put some light on the fact that depression isn't the end, because even the creator of the universe experienced it.
Yeah, no,
That's all.
Yeah. No, I think that's,
I mean, I don't mean to deflect the pain and suffering of it. I don't mean to deflect that it's not intense and serious. I don't mean that. I just want you to know, I just wanted to say that.
yeah. I mean, the same thing, he lived to an old age for all the old people. Well, we're kind of getting into that category. But you know what I mean? It's like he's played all these different parts. And yeah, I mean, they even gave Baba antidepressives. You know, God, you give God antidepressives? I mean, what's going on here? It didn't work, but you know what I mean? It is, even he went to that extent for those, and those who have to take antidepressive medications have been heartened by the fact that their beloved, you know, went through that, and they even gave him antidepressives, you know. So he's there for everyone, you know. That's a beautiful thing. Okay, let's go on to the next one. How about Diane? No, how about Terry? We haven't had Terry for a while.
Since it's her birthday week, we'll make sure
Yeah.
she reads.
I think so.
Yeah. Integrity of purpose. But Meher Baba does not expect that we are suddenly going to relinquish everything. It is a matter of growth. Baba is not talking about dilettante discipleship, but 100% dedicated discipleship and complete devotion. What is important is integrity of purpose. This means being true to the ideal one is trying to attain. In other words, not to have integrity of purpose would mean being willing to set aside one's ideal to pursue things having a lesser value. Once we know the ideal that Baba lays out for us, it becomes our ideal, and we try to be true to it. We discover where we can be more faithful in following our ideal as Baba shows us how it should be done. This 100% dedication comes about not through simply deciding that tomorrow or every Tuesday we are going to work on getting God realization. It comes about when we have matured in consciousness to such an extent that pursuing our beloved ideal becomes a necessity for us all is good too. Jay
Yeah.
Baba.
Yeah, beautiful. Now, what, anything to say to that? I would kind of ask, what
Thanks for the
do
way.
you how do you picture Baba's, what he means by, or Darwin means by our ideal? Anybody want to weigh in on how what that word means in the context of Baba?
Start talking.
Well,
Terry.
I think that Baba's ideal is to to let go of the ego and to definitely work on being present in your life and being of kindness and love and not backbiting, and the things that he's given us to kind of show us how to work our life. And when you were talking before about a leaf not falling, I don't. We've said to y'all that when during COVID, this experience of Zooming with everyone has brought us to Baba in a more intense way than we've experienced before, Diane and I. And we really do see the colors of the trees differently, the magnolia blossoms differently. Everything looks so much more beautiful. I can't even explain it. I go, is this the way it is every year? Like it feels so different when Baba is just so inside you that you don't need the 12 o'clock bell to tell you to say his name. You're just saying his name.
Beautiful. Great explanation.
Jay Baba.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else to weigh in on what Darwin is saying there? Yeah, I think we can go on to the next one, but Terry, I thought you explained that very well. I mean, we all have our own version of what our ideal is, and it gets colored in by, what we're most drawn to, what we love most, what we're being challenged by. But you did it beautifully. Okay. Oh, let's see. How about Jennifer?
Okay. Hi, everybody.
Yeah.
Freedom through love and love through freedom. Love is the medium of exchange between the master and the disciple. So we have to develop our love of God incarnate, love of the Christ. As we make efforts to love him, he helps us in our own way, in ways we cannot imagine. His love, a river of truth, power, light, and strength, inundates us. And far more powerful than any illusion, it erodes away our addiction to the creation. We need to develop one pointed focus on him through love and self-surrender. As we love the Master more and love God more, a latent sense within us opens up. And through our own intuition and insight, we can see that we need not be limited. Meher Baba says that we are not the limited ego, the finite little creature we think we are. In reality, we are the soul, we are the spirit. The soul is always free, always eternal. What Baba is saying is that we are timeless and we can experience the fact of our being spirit here and now. We do not have to wait until we drop the body. As spirit, we are above reincarnation and personalities, gain and loss, and good and evil. We are meant to discover this now, to live at the level of the spirit, not at the level of the body, which is merely the storefront for our business, an instrument for being conscious at the gross level. We are a part of God, every one of us. It is towards this consciousness that the Master is leading us, so that we will get free of the wheel of reincarnation. The Master wants us to share his consciousness with us. That is his gift to us. In 1956, Mayor Baba said to us, "Love Baba with all your heart." When we are free from being dominated and buffeted by our sanskaras, we can love him with all our heart. And can I speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I've had this interesting thing happening, and I think it comes from, rewatching all of the YouTube videos with all of you. And there was at one point in one of them where you were talking about dressing yourself with Baba. And this to me kind of talks about the kind of moving the personality aside so the spirit comes forth. So I was listening to that the other day, and all of a sudden I had this picture in my mind. And it's the Oscars tonight, but all of a sudden I had this picture of Baba with the long flowing hair. But he was dressed in like an Elvis outfit with the leather and the sparkles. And he unzipped, in my picture in my mind, he unzipped the front of his outfit. Elvis always had all those zippers and buttons and such. But there was space inside, and it was kind of like, come on in. And so what I pictured was kind of like, when it was like, dress yourself with Baba, it was literally like getting into the Baba suit. So it was like, I pictured myself putting my feet in those leather pants and zipping up. And so that was one thing, and it was kind of humorous and fun. And so when I think of putting the personality aside and being more merged with Baba, that's the fun thing that comes to my mind. And the other thing that's been happening lately a little bit, I do some energy therapy. That's my job. That's what I do. And I feel really strongly Baba gave that to me to do. And every now and then, not all the time, it's almost like I picture that same, wavy Baba hair with that face, kind of almost like I'm looking through that face as I'm doing the work I'm doing. And I think it's Baba just telling me that, number one, that, I'm on the right track. I'm doing what he'd like me to do. And that we are together. We're all together with Baba. He's a part of us because we're a part of him. So it's been fun to get those little kind of feelings. So I wanted to share that because it talks about, I feel like it helps me move my personality to the side so that when I'm connected, I feel like I am really connected with Baba. And it's not that I'm him. I have all those thoughts and everything, but it just kind of puts the me of this present time kind of to the side.
Yeah, beautiful.
So.
Yeah, I mean, and with that little sense of humor there with the Elvis outfit, and he'll take any guys. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Anyone else to share? Let's go on to now we're going to get into some of the challenges to break free. And we'll go on to the veil making machine. And everybody disappears here. Let's see. How about Gail? Or are you still driving in your car?
Oh, I'm not still driving and I can do this.
Okay, good.
Chapter 4, our veil making machine. Limitation comes into existence owing to ego-centered desires and self-will. Possessiveness in all its forms leads to a life of limitation. Meher Baba. We are always surrounded by a luminous sea, a sea of light, of love, of bliss. The unity underlying all personalities and all things in the universe is God. God is in everything, and everything is God. No matter what we think we are seeking, or what our sanskaras, our conditioned impressions, impel us to seek, we are really seeking to merge with this luminous, all-pervading sea of God to experience eternal, abiding fulfillment. In other words, what we are really seeking is the happiness of union with God. Want me to keep going?
Yeah, first let's stop there. Any comment on that first part? I would say, I mean, Darwin, he backed up everything he said. I mean, this was part of his experience. I mean, that we are surrounded by this ocean of love. We're floating around in it and thinking we're on a raft on the high seas, whereas we're really surrounded by love. I mean, he had that insight into that, but it's very reassuring from somebody who actually had that experience. But yeah, go on. Let's go on. But anything to say? Oh, we do. Durham, North Carolina.
Susan has something to say.
Oh, I hope I'm not talking too much here, but I just wanted to say recently, I felt that in that last paragraph, which is sort of being repeated here, I think the most important sentence is that the master wants to share his consciousness with us. That is his gift to us. That's a very powerful sentence, and I recently connected that with, that's why he wants us to repeat his name, say his name. I just remember hearing Kitty and other people who lived with him saying that's what he was after. He was after trying to help people share his consciousness while they were with him. And I think that's what he's saying here in this next paragraph, that we want that too. It's coming from the other side too.
Yeah. And Darwin would talk about withdrawing the tentacles of consciousness from being enmeshed in identifying with the world and dropping back into the realm of the spirit, beyond space and time, and to be able to stay there and live from there and not get enmeshed. To be aware of life but not enmeshed in it. That's what he was often talked about. Well, Gail, how about going on to the total loss?
Okay, sure. Total loss is gain. Our illusory life is a vacant dream, and Meher Baba has explained that drawing closer to God is the only endeavor that has real value. The general consensus, however, is that happiness lies in fulfilling our desires and in accumulating the self through possessions and achievements, regardless of the fact this only creates more desires, more entanglements, and more bondage. On the involutionary, I can't say that path, the spiritual path, we undergo a refining, awakening process in which we discard elements of the self and sublimate all of our energies so that they can be used to fuel our love for God and propel the self toward Him. Therefore, spiritual advancement is not further development of consciousness, a process of acquiring something or an achievement for the ego. Spiritual advancement is emancipation from the bondage of sanskaras, and it involves disentangling oneself from the false and, importantly, inviting the real into our being, opening to the truth within. This is in contrast to the psychological work of trying to get rid of our painful sanskaric patterns in order to create a pleasant existence in illusion. In other words, trying, perhaps unwittingly, to harmonize with our sanskaras. I believe that as spiritual aspirants, our concentration should be on loving God and merging with Him. And the predominant process we are engaged in is not self-realization, but complete self-effacement, which is both annihilation and complete merging of the personality self into God.
Wow. Anything to say to that? Ah,
Rich.
This paragraph is probably kind of where I'm at. I've been kind of merging into this zone for years, probably, but in terms of aging, I think what happens with aging is your sanskaras, the energy that's packed into those sanskaras, whatever they may be, or the conflicts you have, sort of diminish, and their ambition to grip your consciousness kind of subsides, so you can get a little more clarity on not indulging in those sanskaras, you know. And of course, we're talking about our personality self, but the trouble I have is two things. One, I've been able to at times really feel Baba's presence, but how do I go about living my life and still being, quote unquote, a self? You know, it's a bit. I'm still in the mystery part of that. It's because I can go out, buy milk or groceries and meet people and enjoy people, and I can remember that Bob is there, but to experience not using my sanskaras to do that, I'm not sure what I think what Darwin is saying is you get to a point where you no longer rely on sanskaras to perform in the world. What do you think on that, Jeff?
yeah, he would kind of talk about things being kind of orchestrated, and you witness the unfolding of things. You're not in there having to make hardcore decisions. You know, he had this expression, divine order, where things would just happen and they all have the right ring. All the connections, how things unfolded, was happening kind of through Baba's grace. And he wasn't in there having to move things this way or that way. You know, I mean, that's a very nice state. And, you know, the honeymoon with Baba is often, you know, a rehearsal for that state at the end of our life. Anything more to say to what was read there?
Elizabeth.
Oop, we can't hear you.
Sorry. A couple of things capture my attention. One is that first sentence, our illusory life is a vacant dream. Of course, the vacant dream is referred to when God speaks. It's a dream into a dream into a vacant dream, which is really hard to understand the explanation of that. But then he goes on to say, and Mayor Baba has explained that drawing closer to God is the only endeavor that has real value. And then further down, it talks about that we come to put more and more of our energies into, here it is, if we're on the evolutionary path, a refining awakening process in which we discard elements of the self and sublimate all our energies so that they can be used to fuel our love for God and propel the self toward Him. So I'm not sure that I don't think we're conscious of our sanskaras. I mean, the sanskaras, my understanding is they're working subconsciously and latently, and the difficulties and situations we're in life are a result of those being expressed. But I don't know that on a day-to-day basis, when you're having an interaction, you're saying, oh, that's the sanskara, that sanskara. But I thought it was interesting in this second paragraph towards the end, he talked about the distinction between, he talked about the need to disentangle oneself from the false and invite the real. And then he says, this is in contrast to the psychological work of trying to get rid of our painful sanskaric patterns in order to create a pleasant existence in illusion. So in other words, the process of involution is not this psychological work of trying to deal with our sanskaric patterns that create problems for us. It's something different.
Yeah. I remember saying to Sfandiar, he was, I mean, a very incredibly refined soul, you might say. I said, most of us really feel like came here to try to make the world a better place. You know, I mean, a lot of us had that idealism in growing up to make the world a better place. And that was translated to him, and he said, that is not the purpose of life. The purpose of life is to wake up and not to, like, say, harmonize with your sanskars, to aim for a pleasant life on earth for everybody, but to awaken that love for God. So there you get like two different kind of approaches happening. But a lot of us, I think, grew up, wanting to make things better for others and that, in the worldly sense, rather than in the spiritual sense. But anything to add to? Oh,
Rich.
Just a short comment. The other part of what she read in the last paragraph there, a certain part of me that thinks I'm superior has a great disdain for some of the stuff you see in the world, because it seems like it's obviously a pursuit of building your ego up, and I have a certain admiration for people who are kind of big in the world, not so much celebrity or anything like that, but like I worked for a guy who was such a hard worker, had such a focus, and he created with his life from a young age a contracting business, and he's a millionaire. He started with nothing, and I kind of had I admire that, but on the other hand, I know that without Baba, or if you kick Baba out of that, that experience of life, it's just a vacuum. It's just what she just repeated what Darwin said. It's nothing. It's a dream. And I have another thought on this. I don't know if it's appropriate here, but I've often thought that some of the people that I've known of or heard of that commit suicide have touched upon that nothingness, and they don't know what to do with that because their ego-driven world has no reference point for that.
Beautifully, well said, beautifully, yeah.
Peter.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to try and get this out well. I'm able to get quasi-grounded here. But to answer, to possibly, I don't know if this is going to be oversimplified, but to possibly give a little insight into this, how do we not bring our sanskaras into a situation? I remember times when Bal Kalchuri would discourse in very complex spiritual ways, and you could just sense the audience getting very nervous, like, how are we supposed to do all this? This sounds way too high for human understanding. And then he would wash it all out by saying, just remember him. And also, I wish I had Erich's book in front of me, but somewhere he has, I think, a very famous or very well-known discourse where he talks about there's no end to answers and no end to questions. Stop thinking of everything as being right, wrong, good, bad, ad infinitum. And then at the very end, he had a very, very, very simple equation, which says the only way to get rid of selfishness is to do something and dedicate it to God, dedicate it to Baba. So I think to myself, how would one do that? I remember what Jeff had said a number of times, and what's said in this book is that we're all Baba. So when we go into a situation, think of ourselves as Mayor Baba and just do what we got to do. And that's one way of, I think, not taking our sanskaras into it, and it turns into provisional ego. And also, if we say the prayer at the beginning of the day, God, I now begin entrusting all thoughts, words, and deeds to you. And at the end of the day, Baba, I entrust everything I did, everything I thought, and everything I said. That's another way of giving our sanskaras up. And I just backpedal again to say, sometimes what I do is as simple as, and this is something, I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, Jeff. What works for me time and time again is when I'm going into a situation and I'm nervous because I'm afraid of what's going to happen. I've heard Baba wants to deal with the complication, give it to him. So I literally go up. It's interesting. I go up with my hands, my shoulders go down as if the nervousness is being distilled out. I'm like, here, you handle it, please. To me, that's in a way, another way of going into provisional ego, letting Baba deal with it, going in, at least with I don't know if it's presumptuous of me to say with not my sanskaras, but at least a reduced load of sanskaras on my part. So to me, it would be very simple. Remember that Baba's doing it all. At that time, that's one way of not taking our sanskaras into it.
Excellent.
And maybe I don't know how fulfilled that is, but that is what I remember, at least Eric saying as well. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you expressed that well, and I think most of us are trying to think that it's Baba who wakes up and Baba who lives the day. It helps because then you're not lugging around. Take the responsibility off of your own shoulders. No, that was beautifully said, and it really makes a difference. But it's interesting though. What before we got a couple people hand up, I remember saying to Erich, about the provisional ego. Well, I remember him saying when we were talking about it, it's fine as long as Bob was doing everything. But he said the moment you take credit for one thing, everything collapses like a house of cards. but then get up again, and this Baba, like you get, Baba's doing this and doing that, and then suddenly you get angry at somebody and you yell at them. Oh, man, Baba couldn't have done that. That was me. And the moment you think of that, then the whole thing collapses. But you get on your feet. Well, okay, it's Baba picking up the mess that was just created, and you get back on track. But it's hard. What I found most difficult on the provisional ego, where Baba says, when you do wrong, think Baba is doing wrong. Oh my God, I spent about 10 years trying to accept that. I mean, because boy, that's license. But it turns out to be a great truth in that. When you do wrong, think it is Baba doing wrong, and that way you're not taking credit for it. But was a great hurdle for me. Okay.
Bob,
Yeah, one way that Baba described samskaras in the discourses was samskaras are now the words are escaping me, but it was something like solidified energy, solidified might, so that when those samskaras become active, suddenly anger occurs or whatever it is. That then it interested me that Darwin says here, the elements of the self are sublimated, sublimate all of our energies so that they can be used to fuel our love for God. Well, that's, there's so many tricky parts, but this to me is one of the trickiest ones, is, when something like anger is ready to jump out of one, the trick isn't suppressing it. It's somehow redirecting, reusing that energy. Baba says to swallow it, swallow that energy. But it's not that you're just suppressing it, it's just going to come up again. But somehow finding a way to redirect that energy so that it's being used or released in a better way. So
yeah, that's excellent.
Dante.
Listening to everyone, I had an experience last night where my niece was taking her dog for a walk, and her life is just, in her feelings right now, sucks. And I was having a beautiful evening with Diane and really enjoying ourselves. And all of a sudden she needed to talk. And so I said, okay. And it was really interesting because what she had to say, the old Terry, before Baba consciousness at all, I would have taken in her pain and it would have destroyed me, and instead, all her words, I just saw them going to Baba, because there's absolutely nothing that I could do for her except love her. But the words and what was going on for her, if anyone could help her, it would be Baba. It wouldn't be me. And just being loving and kind and not being judgmental and not saying, what do I have to listen to your crap for? I have my own crap, go to therapy kind of thing. I could actually feel her beginning to breathe again. And it felt like Baba was gifting us both in a way that I could listen without being affected and just be there for her without any hooks or anything in me except love. And, it's kind of like what you were saying, it's about being detached and yet being loving and kind and present all at the same time. And it's not easy, but when you can do it, it's incredibly freeing. And you really do let go, I let go and find Baba more with me, like more connected somehow. So I just wanted to share that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
beautifully descriptive, and you can say before Baba and after Baba, you know, how to handle these situations. It's excellent.
So it's called the BBC now, Before Baba Consciousness.
Excellent, really. That was great.
That's funny, Diane.
Okay.
I just wanted to pick up on what you were bringing up, Bob. I'm glad you brought it up because later in the book, and I know you all are very familiar with this book, under on page 93, the desire to have longing, that word sublimate and sublimation is really key in Darwin's treatise here, for how to operate in the world. It's not like smashing it down, like you say. It's learning to sublimate. I think I read somewhere where he says that, yeah, this is the thing. The sublimation is really the key to what we're trying to do. Redirect our energy. And in this case, in this little paragraph, it's using that energy to create longing. And so I'm glad you brought that up, Bob.
Yeah. Yeah, Darwin really was very big on sublimation, you know, rather than just denying something, but moving it to a more positive, fruitful direction. That whole process. You know, instead of hanging out in the bar all day, you know, all evening, you go and visit your grandchild or something. Okay, let's see. So let's go on to the next one. Now, wait, before you do it, though, let me find somebody here who hasn't read. Let's have Marion. Marion. Oh, what? Yeah, Marion.
All right. Cloudy weather within. Until we wake up to the awareness that we must make some efforts to get free of our sanskaric bindings, we remain very busy continuously making veils over our consciousness. And then we wonder where the cloudiness we experience comes from and why we do not have insight. As Meher Baba has explained so clearly, sanskaras are weaknesses or bindings, and sanskaric veils are obstacles on the path to our spiritual unfoldment. They cloud our consciousness so that we are unable to see clearly at inner levels, and they keep us from experiencing God within. Of course, one can only vaguely generalize about sanskaric veils. They would differ in detail with each individual and be peculiar to one's own distorted, ignorant inner consciousness. Most of the veils, or impressions, that we have absorbed and woven into sanskaric patterns are created by the wanting machine of our desire nature, which is expressed mainly in the form of lust, greed, anger, selfishness, jealousy, a sense of aloofness, pride, and egoism in any form. Other veils are created by our many misconceptions and our false sense of limitation.
Anything to say to that? I like the metaphor of cloudiness, trying to pick up intuitions or insights, and yet there's this cloudiness that's making.
Great.
Well, I hope I'm not overrunning my ability to insightfully comment here, but all of this process, one of the reasons Darwin's book is so valuable, important to me, is I kept thinking, how do I do this? I mean, I don't get it. How can I possibly? And over time, I have to keep reminding myself, I don't really do it. Baba is doing it. Baba will lead you down this path Darwin is pointing at. Baba does it. And how he does it, you know, that's the mysterious magic in the Baba tea, you know?
Yeah. Well said. Oh, well, there's the effort and grace, you know. But even he inspires the effort, but it seems like we're doing it for a while. But then you kind of see a little bit through that. I think that's a fairly straightforward. I mean, that's anything to say to that. Let's do one last one, and we're going to get Anthony Cortez there in Florida on excuses. Oh, both excuses and desires, because that excuses, is very quick on his excuses.
I got to come up with one real quick here. Okay, excuses. Dispelling the veils over our consciousness is subjective work, and my understanding from Meher Baba is that the path for each of us lies through our own sanskaric veils and requires personal efforts. To hold to the belief that the clearing out of those veils will occur on its own over time without our making efforts is to postpone our freedom. We find all kinds of excuses for preserving our own little desire nature and ego. Most people want to play an illusion and have their inner freedom too. We want a sense of spiritual protection and guidance, but we develop a philosophy of life that includes and accommodates our weaknesses. Further, we do not realize that those are weaknesses. We think they are simply attributes of gross consciousness. So, when it comes to giving up all these veils, people tend to rationalize, is it really time for us to do that? Is it really necessary? Does Baba mean for all of us to do that, or just as close as Eastern disciples?
So stop there at this, you know, and then we'll have you go on to desires. Anything to say on to that? I mean, I've mentioned this before, that I once asked Darwin, what is the biggest mistake the Baba lovers are making? And he said they think of themselves as small and they remain small. Think big. Think even outside the conventional spiritual box. They'd say little old me, like if you said little old me, he was not too keen on people saying that, because that's, he would call that, he had a term, a metaphysical rationalization, you know, for not doing things. Oh, I can't do that. I'm not the, that's, like you said, that's for the Mandali. That's not for, you know, some kid from America grew up in our materialistic world.
It's beautiful, Jeff. I think it just really speaks to Darwin's depth and maturity on the spiritual path. You can tell, just as long as this whole process is, how he's just kind of seen it all, you know, where you can cherry pick the parts of it you want, but you're not quite doing this yet. And you can just see how deeply he sees into this whole thing, and how even on the path with Baba, how we can get so caught in, you know, just kind of making it into what we want it to be and cleverly avoiding the things we know that are going to corner us. And it's just amazing. You get the feeling that he just so sees through all of it, all the little tricks that the ego can do, and he's kind of dismantled each one of them, and it's just incredible to see his clarity.
Yeah, he was very compassionate. I mean, it'd be like Einstein, you know, seeing somebody in high school doing math and getting it all wrong, and but you know, he knows, but he wasn't critical, you know, about what people were doing, even though he could see them buying into an illusion and going with it, and it might be a couple of months before they exhausted that thing. He was sitting there watching it, and you know, unless you can persuade someone from going into a direction that's binding for them, if you can't do it, then you just have to wish them well, so to speak.
Ralph,
I'd like to read Webster's comment on sublimate. And there's more than one application. To sublimate is to change the form, but not the essence. Physically speaking, it means to transform solid to vapor. Psychologically, it means changing the outlet or means of expression from something base and inappropriate to something more positive and acceptable. The word sublimate comes from the Latin verb sublimare, which means to lift up or to raise, and which is also the ancestor of our word sublime.
Ooh.
Sublimate itself once meant to elevate to a place of dignity or honor, or to give a more elevated character to. But these meanings are now obsolete. I think Bob is trying to keep those meanings from not being obsolete.
Yeah, beautiful. That's why I forgot that sublimate and making something sublime.
There's more comment, but I won't read all of this to take up time. It's just more on it under Webster's. Yeah.
Yeah.
J. Bob.
Thank you, Ralph.
Peter. Peter.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to make a comment because something that to me gets very confusing is, you know, I'm gonna, maybe Jeff has to fill some of this in, but how when Jeff was saying how Darwin Shaw said our biggest mistake is seeing how large we are, that we need it, we can see how large we are and we see how small we are. I remember somebody mentioning about the Mandali, that they could find anybody they want, anyone on earth. And it's paraphrased, like if they need something, they commanded so much respect that they could find anyone far and wide, they could get anything done, so to speak. However, when people like, say, Bao would make comments that he feels, and this is paraphrased, like a grain of sand, or when Erich made a comment, and again, this is just remembering what Jeff said, how could he feel an emotion when he doesn't exist? It's a challenge for someone like me to understand, wow, I have power. I mean, it's one thing I explain to myself is that I could see myself seeing, speaking, touching, tasting. However, if I'm powerless, who's doing it all? To me, it's a very simple conclusion. it's Baba doing it. Well, and I will try not to get snarky about it because I feel very snarky about that. So it's all Baba doing it. However, every so often I remember that. It's like, to me, the equation is do something, just change ownership or switch ownership of it. So I have a challenge seeing myself being big when I see the authority to which someone like Eric speaks. However, Eric doesn't take ownership of it. He's like, how could I feel anything when I don't exist? And when people like Bao say, I am like the value of a grain of sand on an ocean, it just, I feel challenged by that contradiction. That makes sense to people, and I'll leave it at that.
No, that's I know it's hard to be large and yet a nobody. I mean, your mind just can't handle that. Can't kind of comprehend that. How could you be large and still a nobody? But those two things get resolved in us. I would say. I mean, Darwin used to say, sooner or later you discover you're nobody, and that is not an unhappy discovery. I mean, Darwin was large, and yet here he's talking about being a nobody. How do you bring those two contradictory things down on a worldly level, but at an inner level, it is possible to be large and nothing at the same time. It's a great combination, but I'm glad you bring that up because that's a great challenge for our psyche to be able to harmonize those two, to be to be nobody and yet moving, to be nobody and also to be moving more toward being everybody. Yeah. Anyway, we'll leave that. Maybe as we go on the book through in this book, we will get more of an experience of those seemingly contradictions. Hey, so you know what? Maybe let's stop here because it's a little late on the East Coast.
I think Rich has some comment.
Since you're going to stop here, I was thinking of something. Well, it's about what you were discussing. It's difficult for me too, but I was reading something, and I have several books going at the same time, so I'm not good at quoting or specifics, but Baba says that our minds, our limited minds, even though they're composed of infinite intelligence, veiled with sanskaras, we cannot conceptualize God or the power of God or the beingness of God. We cannot, there's no way we can do it. So I think that might apply to what you were discussing, it right there somewhere in that range between the nothing me and, the first cause. Remember, I was just reading that in the book with Darwin. He says, go to the primal cause, the first cause. And he calls it that because I can't imagine the power of God or anything like that. Thank you.
Yeah, we're the effect, but we're not the cause. Okay, let's, have we got anyone? I wonder, is Mayor Prasad, are you driving in a car? Does anybody have a final, some of Baba's words before we have a moment of silence? Anything that, Goer, have you got something there? Oh, wow, I think she is frozen there. Oh, okay. Bob, you got something?
Yeah, this is a short, it's from Meher Baba's Spiritual Parables. It's a Globe publication from a long time ago. This one is titled The Ultimate Goal. In order that a car should be moving towards its destination, a driver is necessary. But this driver may be susceptible to cultivating strong attachments for the things that he encounters on the way. And he might not only halt at the intervening places for indefinite time, but also get lost in the sideways in pursuit of the things that have only temporary charm. In that case, he might keep the car moving all the time without in any way coming near the goal, and he might even get further away from it. Something like this happens when the ego assumes control and direction of human consciousness. The ego may be compared to a driver who has a certain amount of control over the car and a certain capacity to drive it, but who is in complete darkness about the ultimate destination of the car.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, let's stop for a moment. We'll get Dinku here at the very end, and then we'll have a few moments of silence.
Jay Baba.
Yeah, Jay Baba.
I just found this on one of the WhatsApp Baba sites. The world exists only as long as the soul experiences bondage. When the soul realizes itself as reality, the world vanishes, for it never was, and the soul experiences itself as being infinite and eternal. Meher Baba.
Yeah, that says it all. Let's have a few moments of silence. Jay Baba. Thank you. For the next couple of weeks, we'll do this effort and grace. And so, thank you for coming out on this crazy world.
We've got to convince Tony Patanini that he can comment on effort and grace.
Yeah, you know, we got to get something out of Tony. I mean, I think we ought to, you know, I bet if we just kind of circulated a offering plate, we could kind of get him.
We didn't hear from Gohair either.
Well, I was having fun listening to all of you.
I was waiting for you to say something. You always have such interesting comments.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. No, I agree with everything that everyone said. So enjoy all your sharing. So I learned a lot from all of you too. Hey, Bob.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Have a nice week.
Nazreen.
Thank you, Jeff.
Oh, yes, we have to have Nasreen.
Yes.
Hold on.
Good night, everybody. Okay, Baba.
Just a minute. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Nasreen.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Good.
Bye.
Hey, Baba.
Jai Baba.